Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Methods Guru for Sage Methodspace, and I'm pleased to be joined this morning by Dr. Safary Wa-Mbaleka. And we're going to talk a little bit about culture and research. But before I get started with that, I would like to just mention that if you are new to Methodspace, this is a site that is sponsored by Sage Publishing, and we're interested in all things to do with designing, planning, conducting, analyzing research, writing about it, and sharing results in ways that will make a difference. And as you can see at the heart of this diagram, we have teaching and learning, because we think that whether you are a brand new researcher or an experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. And I know that it's been a learning experience for me, having the opportunity to exchange ideas with researchers from across the world. So why don't you start by just introducing yourself?
Well, I'm Safary Wa-Mbaleka, and I'm Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies here at the Adventist University of Africa, located in Nairobi, Kenya. I've been here only for 2.5 years. I studied in the US mainly, stayed there for 10 years, and then after studying and working there, I was called to serve in the Philippines, where I worked and was teaching research, qualitative research specifically, for 8 years, and publishing qualitative research mainly. And so that is briefly what I can say. I'm a very big enthusiast of qualitative research and cultural exploration.
Well, to begin with, what would be different for qualitative researchers who want to study in Asia or Africa? And I realize that, there are so many cultures involved, but, thinking about the shifts that you've made, what did you need to understand in order to move from place to place and work in a respectful way?
That is quite an interesting question, because my training was mainly in the United States. And so a lot of the textbooks, a lot of the knowledge that I knew was mainly from the Western perspective. And so as far as the ethics and all these things are concerned, I knew this from the Western perspective. But when it came to conducting qualitative research, when I started conducting qualitative research, it was in Eastern cultures, not Western cultures. And so one thing that I can say about both Africa and Asia is that these are covert cultures where things are not what you see or what you hear. There's always a lot more behind what you hear and what you see. And this is something, although there's a lot of variation between African cultures and Asian cultures, but this is something that they have in common. I'm thinking, for example, the covered culture of Thailand. I remember teaching as a visiting professor in Thailand for 2 weeks. I mean, you will never know what people think, because they just don't talk. They just don't want to speak. And then you look at a country like India. It's almost a continent that has so many cultures. I've had students, master's and doctoral students from India, some coming from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west, and you find that they have different cultures that are also involved. And I had some students from South Korea. They were also very covered culture, like Thailand. They have different levels of authority. I remember teaching one class. This was cultural diversity in language learning, where a student was sharing with us that there are 12 different levels of authority. And so when a Korean person asks you, how old are you? Or what is your position? Which may be offensive in other cultures, for them, they want to establish what kind of authority they are going to give you. I remember being part of a community kind of activity. I was attending a seminar in Thailand, northern part of Thailand, called Chiang Mai. And there, the teachers are the highest known people of authority, excuse me, after Buddha. Same thing in South Korea. And so I remember the person who was helping me to learn about the culture there introduced me as a professor. The moment the people who were in a local market, the moment they heard I was a professor, immediately they closed their hands and started taking a bow. I didn't know what to do because, you know, I was much younger than the people who were showing me much respect. So you find a lot of variety happening there. The issue of authority is big in Asia. You find things related to shyness as a way of showing respect to other people is very big. For example, in the Philippines, you cannot, if you invite somebody to be part of your study, they may not say no, not necessarily because they want to participate, but because it is rude to say no to somebody who is in authority. I remember conducting a study in an indigenous group of people in the Philippines and one remote island. I was trying to understand what makes indigenous people learn, because literature had shown that it is very hard for them to pass like everybody else. And some had developed, some educators had developed wrong misconceptions about the indigenous people. So I said, no, there's got to be something that people are missing. And I discovered one school that was doing very, very well. I said, well, there's got to be something we can learn from that. And as I went there, I discovered that people misunderstood with it. People were not able to connect the culture of these indigenous people with the education. And when you start reading the literature from Canada, from Australia on indigenous people, you find the same trend. People want to teach the indigenous people from the mainstream perspective, which does not work. And something that I found that was really interesting, people were begging me to be part of my study. Something that I will not find in the United States. When I was studying, it was hard to try to find people to be part of my dissertation. But here, I had planned to have probably like 5-10 people to interview. But the moment I would finish with one, another person would come and say, "Please interview me. I want to be interviewed as well." This is something else. And when you think about it, sampling procedures and everything that we teach and we learn in these textbooks, it's like, this is not in the book. That many people will want to be interviewed. And you don't have the time to ask, you have all the selection criteria. You don't have time for that when somebody's just out of nowhere says, "I want to be interviewed." And so these are the things that I discovered to be quite interesting to keep in mind when we do conduct research in Asia. The other thing is that translation, and this is the last point I want to mention, the translation of ethics into the Asian context. You find that certain things are not exactly the way we view them in the Western cultures. For example, anonymity. Some people want to have their names there because this is the only opportunity they have to ever have their name written on a published article or book. So right there, it's like, we're not supposed to do this. But no, they are asking for that, and it is their right to have their name there. We can say, by default, we're just going to remove that. And so you find a lot of, for example, the other thing that you find on ethics is that when we're recruiting people from Western perspective, we need to talk to an adult. If it's an adult, we need to ask permission from that adult. But some cultures, and we talk about this in one of the books that is coming up, unless you talk to the elders of the community, you do not have the permission, the right to talk to anybody in that community. And so in some cultures in Asia, if you're talking to the wife, the husband needs to give permission. So these are things that we don't talk about a lot in the Western cultures. And so when we go to the Eastern cultures, especially in Asia in this case, we have to be open-minded because we are going to encounter certain things that we probably never knew, but they are perfectly fine in those cultures.
Right, right. Well, I have so many questions. So thinking about those participants and their responses, given what you were saying about the kind of authority issues and how they saw your role as being a professor, I mean, I don't know, given the nature of the study, but did you feel that people were, willing to be open about their experiences? And, did you feel you were getting the kinds of responses that you wanted, or did you feel that they were more, were guarded about certain things, as you say, in the covered type of culture where, they were only telling you what they thought you wanted to hear? How did you think they were able to contribute?
Yes, I can only speak about the Philippines as far as the actual research that I conducted and published, because I have not conducted research outside of the Philippines in Asia. Most of the Filipino cultures, they are outgoing people. They like making friends, whether you are, it's national, locally or internationally. There are people who are very much outgoing. And so that makes them easy to communicate with. But still, of course, you need to establish that level of friendship or rapport, something that we promote a lot in qualitative research. And so once that is established, and it's not always very difficult in the Philippines. I've visited, I've spoken in many places, north, south, east, west of the Philippines. Usually doesn't take long to build that rapport. And so for me, that helped me in all the studies that I did. That was very easy to build that rapport, and I was able to get definitely data that I could trust. The only place where it was a little different, just a little different, was the southern part. The southern part is mainly Muslim, and for some reason, politically, this is an area that has been kind of excluded politically from the rest of the Philippines. And so you have to make a little bit more effort to establish that, hey, I'm not here for political purposes. I'm here for research and to learn from one another. And once that is really established, then everybody opens up, and then you start finding things that you don't find in the national narrative on certain issues like policies, national policies, that is not captured because basically those voices from the South have not really been heard, have not been prominent in the national discussion. Yeah. So
with the examples that you've given about, some particular things, with the getting acknowledgement and permission from the elders, or from, different, people in different roles, whether it's the spouse or whomever, what kinds of gatekeepers or kind of cultural guides, do you suggest that people, try to make if they want to do research?
Well, in general, I can say that if you are a foreigner and trying to conduct research in the Asian context, please read about the culture of that specific country. I mean, even if a country has several cultures, they still have many things that they share in common. And so it would be good to learn about respect. How do you show respect? How do you show gratitude? In some cultures, you have to give a token of appreciation. In other places, you need to give maybe something. How do you interact with people? What is the role of position, of ranking? What is the role of the elders in the community? This is something that we have to consider in many Eastern cultures, not just even Asian cultures, but many Eastern cultures. But now zeroing in to the Philippines where I was, I would say that there were two different places, no, three areas where I conducted research. One, the main one was university settings. And so as far as universities were concerned, I had to go through the research department of the university and make sure that the vice president for research and the director of research are involved, are informed ahead of time, and they give permission. Trying to go behind the scenes, that will really not be right, to just go straight to the individuals. The second dimension, I did some research that involved government. And so for this one, I needed to always identify if it is a provincial government, I need to get permission from the government, and they usually have a research unit that handles these things. Sometimes I would just go personally face to face, because emails a number of times didn't really work, but you show up and I say, here's my instrument, this is what I want to do, and I will get it from there. The third one was the villages where I conducted a study on the indigenous people. And I was so lucky that for each village that I visited, there was somebody who had connection with the chief of the village chief. And the most remote one, I happened to ride on the boat with the chief, the village chief. I didn't know he was until we got to the village, and everybody was coming with a lot of respect. I said, who is this person? Only to discover he was actually the chief. And thank God I had treated him well on the boat. We had created some kind of rapport. And so when I got there, he was the one introducing me to all the people, and everybody was just so happy to meet me. Yeah.
So you mentioned the value of being able to have those conversations face to face. And yeah, I think about, so even if you are an outsider, either going to a different culture within your own country or going to another country, if you're going to do field research where you've got to find a place to stay and you've got to make arrangements, and in the process, you're talking with people, you're, beginning to get a sense of how do people relate to one another, in an informal way or a formal way. And, you're kind of getting a little bit of a sense of how things work. Whereas I think today, where so many researchers are trying to do research online, and as you know, this is an area that I've, written quite a bit about, but I think that, when you think about, say, researcher could be just saying like, I think I'll do my study with people in Africa, but they don't, because they're not traveling there, they're not going through those stages of making arrangements and stuff, which would have given them a chance to learn something about that community, because it's just, we're just connecting electronically. Do you have any advice for people who are thinking about, a more global study, but, conducting it, collecting data electronically?
Thank you so much. One thing I want to zero in on first before I go to the technology part is the multilingual context of Asia and Africa as well. Just to give you an example, Nigeria, I remember the last time I checked, it had like 600 languages. As far as Africa is concerned, that's just one of the 54 of more than 50 countries in Africa. Asia, Indonesia is supposed to have close to 700 languages, just one country. And so when we are trying to do this international research, in addition to cultures, we need to think about how we're going to communicate, because most likely we're going to come across people who do not speak the language that we're speaking. And so working with research assistants is very, very, very important. Now coming to the technology, I think this is the best thing, one of the best things that have come out of the pandemic. The technology, we have used now a lot of technology, just like right now, you are in the US, I'm in Kenya, and we're having this conversation. And I don't want to see people going back to how things were. We have gotten so much today that we can use for research. For example, in Asia, they are known to be heavy users of social media. Facebook, Messenger, TikTok, Instagram, blogs, YouTube. These are places that have already a lot of data that we can use. That we can use. It's readily available that we can use. We can use the same technology to generate data through interviews, focus group discussions. Now we don't have to travel to do that, although traveling will help build a stronger rapport. But at least if there is maybe there are issues for security, safety, or issues of finance, now we can conduct research collaboratively with other people without having to travel. One thing that is being used tremendously in Asia right now is Google Meet, which is like the Zoom equivalent of Google. And this is being used even in elementary school for teaching, college, university, you name it, people are using Google Meet. This, which can also help very much in individual interviews and focus group discussions, or panels. If you're doing therefore study, you can have a panel, a panelist who will be brought together to work on a therefore study. So there is really a lot of technology that can be used that is already in place. Even here in Africa, they use WhatsApp a lot. This is for calls. These are all tools that can be used to collect data, to collaborate with people from between the West and the East.
Well, it sounds like with that kind of usage, that would also give researchers access to materials that would help them to gain those kind of more particular cultural understanding. So, if the people that they want to interview or have focus groups or other kinds of interactive types of data collection, they could begin by trying to explore, the groups and the postings so that they can, kind of get a little bit more of a sense of, again, how do people interact, what are the sensitive topics that you should avoid, or how you might frame questions. So it seems like that might be a good preparation step, as well as potentially being a source of data.
Definitely. And I just want to highlight here the fantastic work you have done. I have used your book, I've used some of your articles, some of your blogs, as far as this online research is concerned. And anybody watching this, if you have not used Dr. Janet Salmons' work, please go to Amazon or Google, whatever. You'll find him all over the neighborhood. And you have presented things that are very practical. You see, in the past, I remember when I first entered the field of qualitative research. That was 2004, I believe, the first time I really read something about qualitative research. The books were very hard to read. Those were written in the 70s and 80s. But when you read a book like the one, those that you have written, the articles, it's so straightforward, practical, that people can use. And so it is really good for us to start using these resources that are available, for us to not to be restrained by space, because now technology can connect us to the rest of the world.
Right. Well, I just want to ask you one more question. I mean, obviously, you're an enthusiastic qualitative researcher and a leader with the Asian Qualitative Research Association. And so what is it about qualitative research methods that appeal to you, given all the kinds of things that we're discussing? I mean, it would certainly seem to me that being able to tap into the stories and to be able to have the conversations with people, would be useful when studying, in another culture, just to, be able to get some of the nuance that might not be possible with, say, a more formal survey instrument that would be used in a quantitative study. But what is it that has attracted you, and how do you see, the researchers involved with your association responding to these kinds of methods?
Yes, in 2015, me and my two friends, we created the Asian Qualitative Research Association. It's called ACRA, which is, I believe, the largest qualitative research organization in Asia right now. It's located in the Philippines. And it continues to grow. It's now in more than 30 countries, I think close to 40 countries. And this is because of the passion that I had for qualitative research. I started being invited to speak about qualitative research and giving trainings and seminars, workshops, and short talks on qualitative research. That and at the same time, I was conducting qualitative research, and as I was conducting research, especially interviews, and that is the answer to your question, because I love cultures. I love cultural exploration. I have taught cultural diversity, both in the US and in the Philippines. And now, actually, I just finished teaching another doctoral course on cultural leadership and in a multicultural context. So it's a topic that I love. And the more I interview people, I will talk to them. First of all, I usually get to know more about the people, appreciate more their culture, but also learn in depth what is happening in their communities. And so I would say interviews are really some of my most preferred methods of data collection. As far as the design, I like case study much more than everything else. And phenomenology case study, because it's a much more one size fits all kind of design. I can easily move around with case study, which is flexibility I wouldn't get in other designs, while phenomenology is the lived experiences of people, especially intense experiences. And in Asia, when I was living there, a number of people have gone through serious challenges, like typhoons hit every year. There are typhoons that hit the Philippines, and so that always affects people, schools, businesses, communities, and people die, and so on. And phenomenology is really good with that. So these are some of the things, methods that I have found very interesting. And now, starting with the COVID-19, I have not conducted research, qualitative research per se, because I've been writing more on theoretical pieces and books on how to guide other people. But I know very soon I'll be conducting interviews online using Zoom to get more from that perspective. But that's more or less what has been happening with me.
Well, thank you for speaking with me today, and we will continue to feature some posts and additional interviews with your new handbook of research about qualitative research in an Asian perspective, which I think many viewers here will find very useful, whether they're planning to conduct research in Asia or simply trying to get a better understanding of kind of cultural contexts that they might want to be aware of as we are increasingly in a global society where we are connected with others. The more understanding we have, the better things will be from my point of view. So thank you for sharing, I think, some very useful tips for our Methodspace readers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janet. It was a great joy to have this discussion, and I encourage people who are interested in the handbook that is coming up in the next months. I think we'll be talking about that. It is the SAGE handbook of qualitative research in the Asian context. You can already start previewing that online.
All righty, thank you.